Hello, everyone. So, I'm presuming most of the audience has already had a chance to watch the film. But why don't we I'm going to turn it over, I think, first to Nick, if you just want to kind of do a brief kind of introduction to the film, just for the benefit maybe of those who have not had a chance to see it yet.
Yeah, sure thing. And it's great to be on here and see a bunch of familiar faces. Like, kind of, I resonate so much with what Doug was saying about the value of these face-to-faces. Like, this community has touched a lot of aspects of the making of this movie, from connecting me with crew to like questions in the forum about all aspects of making the movie. It's been an amazing resource. So I remember actually going to these while making my film, and it's kind of surreal to actually be one that's in the spotlight now. So yeah, so I'm the director of My Omaha, a film that spent almost 10 years making. It's a film with really kind of two intersecting narratives, and the first one is a look at Omaha's kind of racial justice movement and the story of activists and people that are really trying to make change when it comes to some of the systemic issues happening in the city. The other narrative is a personal storyline about political division, and particularly looking at the political division between me and my dad, and how we try to overcome that, and how that becomes even more intensified once he gets diagnosed with cancer. So altogether, it's very much just a portrait of Omaha, in a city that's grappling with all of the most trying issues of the times. So we premiered earlier this year at Slam Dance, and now we're working on getting the film out into the wider world.
Great. And we'll talk a little bit about that because you're going to be doing something very unique with the film next week, I think. But yeah, I would love to. I don't know, Leo, you turned your camera off, so I'm not sure if you're there right now. But if you are, otherwise
I
I
am
will
here.
just say welcome. Thank you so much for making time to join us. Today we have an audience that are predominantly people working in documentary. So I think a lot of what we're going to be talking about is process. But we do want to obviously talk about story. And I saw somebody actually, and thank you for responding to that. Someone already asked how they can support your organization. So thank you for putting that link in the chat. But I'd love to know more, because obviously when Nick first approached you, and met you in the film, you sort of that sets up things, but then a film is an evolving thing. And so it's often very different once the film is complete and out there, and you've had a chance, I think, to go to some of those screenings. And so I'd love to know more about sort of how this project has evolved for you, just from the first time that you and Nick met to filming to even afterwards, and now that the film is out in the world.
Excellent. Am I on screen?
Yes.
All right, good. Something popped up and I click on it and it gets to my camera off. So yeah, this conversation alone is part of the evolution. Because when I first met Nick, I told him that I'm not interested in documentary, and that the reason I'm not interested in documentary is because I'm used to, in our community, people coming in, having conversations, wanting to do a little, grab a few sound bites, put together a couple of clips, and then run off and go on with their whatever film career or whatever they choose to do with their documentary, however they plan on putting it out. Meanwhile, the people who they filmed or put or gathered information from are left in the same social condition, and that's not what I wanted to see. And so Nick gave me his word that he was going to be consistent. He'd do the best that he can to make sure that giving back and making sure that the people in the documentary got proper credit was going to be part of it. And his consistency bared out to be true. He did what he said he was going to do, and he reached back out to me when the film was done, and he kept me involved every step of the way. So that was an evolution in and of itself, because the trust that I had for people who came into the community to do research, to film, to do anything that involved a large group of people and trying to identify what struggles or conflicts they may be having. Oftentimes we do what we call in the research field helicopter research, where they come down, they do something, and then they disappear. And Nick proved that differently. So I would say just our relationship alone is a huge evolution from where I began in the middle of this project.
Thank you. And can you update us a little bit on what you've been doing and with your organization, since filming wrapped? I think people would be very curious to know more.
Yep. So at the end of the filming, at the end of the film, I'm still with the Malcolm X Memorial Foundation. I recently resigned from the Malcolm X Memorial Foundation last year in December. However, the majority of the organizing efforts you see in the film were while I was with the Malcolm X Memorial Foundation. Now, all of that work is volunteer work. And so there's a lot of stuff that you see me doing that looks spectacular, but it was not funded. And to this day, that's a lot of the work that I still do. I'm literally in the middle of a very high level organizing project right now. The mayor of Omaha has been dealing with this issue of Terrence Crawford being stopped by police officers, and it's got national news. Well, I've been working with a family who was the victim of a police homicide where the police shot and killed a young man who just happened to have a weapon on him that was legally owned, but he was actually afraid of police. And so, out of fear, he got out of his car. He ran from the police. They chased him. They ended up shooting and killing this young man. And the family's been seeking justice. They hadn't received any justice. So, a pivot to the work that we could do was, instead of rallying and doing protests and not seeing a lot of results, we decided that we would start to educate other young men and people in the community on how they can interact with police and get out of those situations alive so that they can continue to move forward with the judicial process and look for justice that way. So doing that work actually positioned us in a very unique situation, because when this situation happened with Terrence Crawford, he actually complied with the officers, got out of the car, and the mayor was looking for a way to talk about this issue. And I said, well, you have a way to talk about this issue because it happened on the anniversary of the young man who got killed by the police that I'm talking about. And so right now, as we speak, I'm waiting on a call from the mayor's office so that we can collaborate on this process of educating other young people in the midst of this story going on with Terrence, and also the midst of the family grieving, because the grand jury process had recently finished on September 27th, which was the day before Terrence Crawford's issue, and the grand jury released the officer of, or absolved the officer of any wrongdoing. And that was devastating to the community and the family. Not only in that particular case, but in 7 other cases as well that were officer involved shootings. And so the community is really tense right now with community police relations, which what you see in the film is a protest for George Floyd. Well, the city of Omaha have had about 4 George Floyds since last year. And I've been working on those types of projects all year long. And so it's all coming to a head right now in real time today. So that's one of my major projects that I'm in the middle of working on, but I do a number of other things which I can talk about a little bit later, but I don't want to take up too much time on this particular topic until we get further into the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Because I think that's one of the challenges of filmmaking too, is, a film has an end. At some point, the timeline ends, but the people, because these are documentaries, the people in the film story keep going. So I appreciate you taking time to tell us what you're doing. And Nick, I just want to bring it back to you for a second, and then I'll bring Doug in a minute. But I think that and I appreciate Leo saying that the concern about helicopter, kind of coverage in documentaries, because I think you actually address sort of head on in the film, that, you're a white person making a film about, that one of the themes is about racial justice. And so it's in some ways, it's a story about a time and a place. It's obviously about issues that I think, are more important than ever. So I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about that, just in terms of your process of making the film.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. It was really important in the editing to be just super transparent about that reality of being a white filmmaker, taking on this kind of topic and trying to be as thoughtful and recognize the just inherent biases that come with that. And what I like about how it came out was that the on-screen conversation that Leo and I had about that felt to me very reflective of all the off-screen conversations that we were having about that. So it ended up, I think, helping people understand the transparency that I was bringing to the filmmaking process, which just helps, I think, put people at ease when they're watching the film. My own just education about that is something that continues to evolve. I mean, so much of making the movie was also a continued education on racism and white privilege for me. Like there were so many events that I was filming as the documentarian, but that I was also very much learning just as a white person. So um I give a lot of credit to Leo for having that trust and also educating me where appropriate as well, both as a filmmaker and also just as a white person.
Thank you. So Doug, let's bring you in because you said at the very top of this, and for those who might have arrived a little bit late, I mean, this film in many ways is a perfect example of the D word and its spirit. Because if I'm not mistaken, you and Nick met through the D word, and you got involved and eventually became a producer on the film. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your entry into this project.
Sure. I mean, let's see, Nick was saying it was like the end of 2000 that he first started going on the face-to-faces or learning that I did some consulting work. I mean, I've made a lot of personal docs, and I've done a lot of consulting, but for some reason, the first year I didn't really mention that I do consulting much. So I think it was right around a year into it that I let the cat out of the bag, so to speak. And I think Nick followed up at the beginning of 2021, just as a consultant. I mean, he had a long, was it an assembly, Nick, or actually a cut of some kind?
Yeah, it was more of an assembly. Yeah.
It was a mess.
Screen. I mean, it's self-edited.
Yeah, no, I mean, you even said it wasn't you said, you warned me that it was kind of messy. And it was, it needed a lot of work. But, a number of things just really stood out to me. One was, right away, the situation in Omaha, and just the racial divisions there were kind of stunning. And Nick and Leo's relationship was really interesting, as a just in a dramatic sense. I could see where that might lead to. Um, but actually, what really stood out to me was that conversation that he had about Trump with his dad, was pretty much cut even then, I think. And I just went like, whoa, this is um, this is really emblematic of so many conversations going on in households all over the country. I remember showing, when it was a little further along, I showed, I guess, the first real rough cut of it in better condition to my wife, and that scene comes in like 2 or 3 minutes into the film, and it goes for about 3 minutes. And after it was done, she just turned to me and said, "Wow, this is going to be a really important film." And yeah, I mean, it uh, it's good that this is going to be coming out right before Thanksgiving because I can just see all these family meals come Thanksgiving time. And I just saw the film early on as kind of an opportunity to discuss the two biggest divides I think going on in the country, the political divide and the racial divide. And the trick has been how to interweave the two, the two threads, um, and make it feel organic. And that took a lot of work. And I give a lot of credit to the editors, particularly Maeve O'Boyle and Jordan Montminy, who kind of brought it down the backstretch and just did incredibly valuable work on the film to get it there. Um, but anyway, we kept collaborating. Nick came back every few months for a consult. Sort of we were alternating producing consults, and then the story would go get edited a little bit more and get whittled down. Um, but I also just, Nick's such a um, likable guy, for lack of a better word, a likable character. So I just felt like he is his. It kind of rate. It's kind of who he is. I mean, I think you can already get like what a nice, sincere guy he is. He doesn't have a cynical bone in his body, and I just felt like he's someone in a personal documentary. It's just really important that you kind of immediately relate to the person who's telling you the story. And I felt like that immediate connection with him when I started watching the footage. And um, so all the elements were there. It was just a matter of kind of, getting into shape.
Thank you. So, Nick, this is also a story about a father-son relationship, in the context of all of these other bigger themes. And so I was wondering, if you can talk a little bit more about that. I mean, obviously, even the comfort level that you and your dad had talking about this changed in the course of the film, but I'd love to know more about that process. Did you share footage with him as you were going, or did he understand sort of the bigger context of things that you were filming, and then particularly that scene where he attended that session, I guess, of the kind of the community group was really powerful, even though he didn't say very much in that. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so most of the filming with my dad takes place after, he gets diagnosed with cancer. And the way that I really kind of framed this project to him was that I felt like this was really a big opportunity for us to reconnect and also to tell other people our stories. And I think he responded well to that. And I remember before we really started, we were on a family trip. This was after he got diagnosed, but we went to South Dakota. There's actually a scene in the film. It's when we were in Mount Rushmore, and I remember asking him point blank. I just said, "Hey, if we're gonna do this together, like this is really gonna be a commitment. Like we're really gonna have to go the distance and just be really vulnerable and honest. Like, are you open to that?" I wanted to. I didn't want to like lead him down something that was gonna surprise him. And to his credit, he was down, and I think that every conversation got deeper and got more vulnerable. Um, And there was a lot of aspects that helped. I think that doing it super DIY was really helpful. Like I shot almost every interview with him, just me. And so making it feel like he could really just retreat into the conversation, forget about the cameras, and just be me and him made it feel super vulnerable. I chose locations that I knew had significance or that would be comfortable for him or that represented things. Like we spoke at Animal Ranch he volunteered at, that was important to him. We spoke at a church that meant a lot to him. So try to do a lot from a producing perspective also to make it feel comfortable. Um, and then, to his credit, my dad is just a super authentic person in the way that he talks about things. So, oftentimes when you're interviewing a documentary subject, you have to kind of whittle down some of the fluff, or some of the performative aspects of their interview. The amazing thing about both Leo and my dad is neither of them, I didn't have that problem with either of them. Like you can kind of get to the heart of the matter with both of them very quickly, and that's so rare, I think, in documentaries. So, um, and the last thing too is that I think with the documentary subject, it's always helpful if, identifying kind of what the other person's motivation is for them to be in your film. For my dad, his motivation was with the time he still had, he wanted to make sure that he knew that he could share his points with me. He was till the end very passionate about his perspective, and he wanted me to know what he believed in. So, yeah, I think all of that created a perfect kind of storm for things to work out the way they did.
Thank you. And a follow-up, because I think, and I don't know if this is me as a woman watching the film, but I think there's also another theme here that is also about men and emotions and expressing those emotions, through all of the people who are in the film. And so I actually, and sorry, spoiler alert for folks who have not watched the whole film, but that scene towards the very end where you follow up with someone that your dad had an impact on. I'd love to know more about, how that came about, because it's very unusual for a film to suddenly have a new character show up at that late in the story, but it also, I think, gave us a little bit more insight into your dad and his character. So, can you tell us more?
Yeah. So up until that point, everything that involved my dad in the movie was kind of generated by me. It was like our interviews or our conversations, and I kind of felt like it would be helpful if there was another maybe perspective that could come in. Um, so my dad had told me about Ghost, the character you're referencing, kind of in passing. Like he just told me that he got to know this guy who was Native American, formerly incarcerated guy that he had kind of become friends with on this ranch, but he didn't really make a big deal of it. And I was watching an old interview we did, and he talked about him, and I thought I should reach out to that guy. Like I just would be very curious to know more about him. And so I got his number through a mutual acquaintance, and I called him. And when I told him who I was and I just started talking about my dad, Ghost started crying on the phone. And he just kind of, I think it was the first time he had connected with anyone connected to my dad since my dad died. And there was just so much raw emotion there. And I could tell how like genuinely much he loved my dad and how much of an impact my dad made on his life that like immediately I knew like I got to go meet this guy, and hopefully he'll let me film him and let this be a part of his story. So, I was fortunate, I guess, to have a little bit of a taste of what could be, that what could happen. And so he lived in Kentucky. So I just made very quick plans to go there. Again, by myself, just as a kind of lone crew, which helped again. And very quickly, when I met him, he opened up in the same way, which was so cool. So yeah, it's almost kind of one of those like divine things like that happen when you make a doc where, Bill Jersey came about in a similarly like random way. And I think when you feel an intuition that these things could be a very important story beat, you just have to go. Even if you don't know what it's going to turn out to be, that's almost better because then you're just open to letting the universe play it out the way it's supposed to be.
Thanks. And I'm seeing a lot of interesting comments and questions in the chat. We will be opening this up for questions soon. But I wanted to just skip away from the story for a second and get back into like the film as a film and getting the film out there. Because, as Doug said, just with the reaction of his wife, this is a very timely film. Just in terms of the divides we're facing. But I know it has not been the easiest film to get out there, since your premiere at Slam Dance. So I'd love, and maybe, I don't know, Doug, if you want to tackle this, but just sort of what has been the story of the film, and I know you have this interesting, very unique sort of screening coming up, but would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, thanks. This will hopefully give some solace to a lot of filmmakers who have been rejected by a lot of film festivals, and we hear about that on the D word all the time. Um, we got a stunning amount of rejections from film festivals after Slam Dance, and the reaction couldn't have been stronger at Slam Dance either. So we were really surprised. I mean, some festivals that I've been to many times, and I thought were like perfect festivals for this film, like Full Frame, True False, DC Docs, Camden, you know, uh, all seemed like this is the moment. They're festivals that look for not just timely films, but films that are by emerging filmmakers that they love to discover new filmmakers. And I thought, wow, this is like right in their wheelhouse. And what could be timelier or more important? So so that's been really frustrating, and I feel really badly for Nick because festivals are where you get the best audiences. You don't even have to work usually to fill up the seats, and they're just so responsive, and it's such a great experience for the filmmaker. Um, but a couple of really lucky things happened. Not lucky, but timely things. I read about this initiative called the In Real Life Movie Club that was started by Annie Roney, who is the head of Roco Films. This is not something that's out of Roco, but it's a separate thing. But she got a, a pretty sizable foundation grant to start a series. I think it's 4 films a year that she picks and puts out quarterly, and we're the third film. And the idea is to have it shown as many U.S. theaters as possible on one day, and it's there's not a traditional Q&A because how can the filmmakers be at every theater? And it's not even one that's done on screen. The idea is to start conversations among the audience. And so at the end of the film, there's a series of 2 or 3 prompts, questions that are thrown out. And the idea is for the audience members to kind of turn to each other and start talking. And, we asked Annie, does that actually really work? Do they actually really do that? And she said, yeah. She was like kind of really surprised, pleasantly surprised how that it sparks those kinds of things. and the audience members stayed for like a really long time afterwards. So like I said, we're the third film. I think the first film got into like 20 some odd theaters, the second into a little over 50. And what are we at now, Nick? I know it's over 70.
Yeah, I think it's like 72 or 3 at the moment.
Okay. So it's going to be on October 12th that we will open in 72 or 3 theaters around the country. Just on that day, we don't even know what time it's playing.
They're all different times. Some
Yeah.
are afternoon, some are evening, and I
And-
think
and-
it's at least 30 states, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And we hope, we hope this is a replicable model because it's so helpful to the film to be able to kick it off this way. How it works is that IRL Movie Club pays the theaters, I think it's like a $500 rental fee or a fee. And like I said, one showing that they can pick any time of the day. They charge $5 a ticket. So that really encourages people to come. I don't think we get anything other than, I mean, money-wise, other than a lot of publicity. I mean, she has a publicist working to get as much press as possible, and we're trying to make as big a deal of it as possible as well. And then we are opening in Omaha 2 days later. We intentionally didn't, told them not to play it in Omaha on the 12th. So the 14th is our big opening at this, great theater called Film Streams. And we already sold out the big 300-seat theater like a couple weeks in advance. So they're starting to add more showings. It's going to be great. Leo's going to invite, we're trying to include as much of his community in North Omaha as possible, or have special screenings or talks there. And maybe Leo, you can talk about that as well. And then, just to tie this up, we hired an impact team called Carrot Outreach, or Carrot Impact, to impact partners from participant films are headed up. So they're working on with us to get it out to as many like community centers and churches, faith-based places, anywhere where we can continue that initiative of sparking discussion. And then Jim Brown in Argo Pictures is doing it's called service deal distribution, where you pay a fee and he tries to book it in as many places as well. So that's the plan. Some of this is we have grants where we're trying to raise money now, obviously, to pay for all that. Some of it's coming out of Nick's pocket still, more than he'd like. But we just have faith that it'll come back and it'll all be worth it in the end.
Thanks, Doug. And I did put a link to the IRL Movie Club in the chat, and maybe Nick, you want to put something in for the film in general so people can follow in terms of other screenings. But I do want to bring it back to Leo to, maybe get your perspective on those upcoming screenings. But also, I think, if I'm not mistaken, you had a chance to attend the premiere at Slamdance. And so, and I know we touched on this a little bit, that you have had sort of this evolution with the film, but how has the reaction been, and in terms of you getting to see the film with other people, who may not be from Omaha, and maybe having, coming with certain preconceptions about Omaha, about, people in the film, about the story. I'd love to hear a little more about your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think it looks like the film was received really well in California at Slam Dance. I think It's different because we're in LA. It's a little more liberal. And so the people who approached me had a lot of nice things to say. It's going to be interesting to see how Omaha reacts because Omaha still has that division. It's still that way. Even as I told Nick, I said, you're probably going to sell out to the film streams audience first. And the issue is the people in North Omaha, the community that I'm familiar with, is not familiar with small movie theaters. They're used to the big box theaters, they go there. And so they're not going to be familiar with the ticket purchasing process and they're probably going to procrastinate. And that's probably what happens. So we'll see what the demographic looks like when we actually get to film streams for the first premiere screening. Because I have people who have now reached out to me and they reached out to me as late as yesterday asking for tickets and they're like, it's sold out. And, and I'm like, okay, well, we'll see what we can do and try to figure some things out. But I told them there'll be another screening a few days later. And so, yeah, my experience in California was good at Slam Dance. People walked up to me, said they really appreciated my role in the film, the context that I brought to the film. And so that was uplifting. That was encouraging. It's going to be interesting to see what happens locally. I got a lot of people that do appreciate my work here in Omaha, but it's going to be really a lot more interesting to see what other cities think. There's a part in the film where there's a large rally, and my co-host for that rally, she's in Nashville, and so she reached out to me asking how can she see the film because she wants to be there for the premiere, and I sent her the link for the IRL club so that she could try to find it near her. And I don't know how far Knoxville is from Nashville, but that's where it'll be screening where she's at.
Yeah, and I think that's something I know, Nick, you put in the chat, kind of following up on what Doug was saying about festivals that, you've gotten into maybe 4 out of 50 applied for. And I think that this is a really interesting example of a film that maybe it was a blessing in disguise. I hate to say it that way, to not get into a ton of these, festivals that seem like obvious spots for it. And the fact that like I would love to tell people about the IRL Film Club, but I'm in the DC area and there really aren't any screenings near us. But there are a lot of screenings in smaller cities that maybe don't normally get documentaries. And I think that, especially given the topic of this film, um, maybe that's more important. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, a big lesson for me in this process was definitely to not get so hung up on festival success as a form of like overall success, right? Like there's so many, I mean, one, you can't control any aspect of getting into the festivals, but there's also a lot of things working against you, to be frank, when you're an independent filmmaker. And most of us here on these calls, the D word community is an independent community. So, when you're trying to get into big name festivals, you're competing against executive producers that are celebrities that have documentaries. You're competing against people that have gotten some of those institutional funding grants, whether it were doc labs or just like really big developmental grants where they're kind of on a track and they get, a lot of, visibility. I didn't have that. And so I feel like from the jump, you're at a disadvantage when you're coming in as a bit of an unknown. And um, there's a lot of great resources out there about distribution that I've learned from that I think a lot of people have probably heard of through the D word already. Like Show and Tell is fantastic. I've been a member of Show and Tell. I've been very inspired about the things that they do to get their movies seen in front of their audience. Um, I think that we get super lucky with IRL Film Club in a way. I mean, it's a perfect match, but I think that if that had not come into the picture, we would continue to be trying to think of innovative ways to show the movie outside of the festival realm. And there's a lot of ways to do that. There's conferences, there's kind of doing it the impact way by reaching out to organizations like churches and community centers and things like that, which we're also doing. Um, yeah, I think the lesson is that you have to you have to be just as scrappy to get your movie shown as you do making it, and that there's a temptation to want to kind of like kick your feet up and let other people do the work when you finally finish. But I don't think anyone other than yourself is going to be as passionate about getting it seen, so you kind of have to own it to get the most out of it.
It's also, Erica, the distribution landscape has changed so much. It used to be the model was you'd go to festivals hoping to land a distributor, and hope the distributor does the dirty work of getting it out there. And that's always been pretty dissatisfying to filmmakers. There's very few, filmmakers you can go back and say that they were thrilled with what the distributor did for their movie. So, the importance of festivals, I think, is diminished. And, remember, I think it was last year, there's only one documentary that came out of Sundance that got distribution. For the longest time, I think maybe down the line some did, but like, if that can't be a launching pad for distribution, what can? So, we tried to keep that in mind as the rejections kept coming in. Nick and I had a lot of conversations and pep talks and things like that.
Great, thank you. So we're going to open it up for audience questions. I've seen a bunch of questions put in the chat, but if you could please use the raise hand function, and we'll be happy to bring you on camera to ask your question, because sometimes it's hard to keep up with the chat. I saw Joanne had her hand up earlier, and she's back on, so let's bring up Joanne.
Brave of you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I thought it was very brave of you to choose this topic as a white guy. And Leo, I thought it was very generous of you to open up what you were doing in your community to this white guy. And I hope you learned a lot from each other. I have a suggestion though, since this film is showing on the same day in many different cities. I know it's showing in Milwaukee at the Oriental Festival at noon, I think. Why don't all of us on the D Word find out where it's showing, where we are, and all go to the screening. And when the conversation starts, we can step up and say, I know the filmmaker, I've seen the film, let's talk about it. And be sort of volunteer
ambassadors
yes for the film. I know I'm going to go, and I'll jump up on stage and say, I know Nick, and I know Doug, and I know Leo, so let's talk about it. So if we all did that, it'd be very helpful for the film and for all of us to get the word out about how important documentaries are.
Great idea, Joanne. Thanks.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you for making that suggestion, Joanne. I think, again, that comes back to the spirit of the D Word and what it's all about in terms of this community. And so I think for those who do have the film playing near them, do try and go, and do try and encourage people you know to go. Let's bring up Karen.
Hi, good afternoon. I wanted to ask Leo, it was so very powerful what you said in the beginning about filmmakers that don't look like us coming into our neighborhoods and making films about us, and then, they disappear and nothing else happens. My question to you is, what would you suggest for filmmakers who are coming into our neighborhoods and making these films about not only how to approach coming into our neighborhoods and making these films, but also about how they can do something to help the neighborhood and not just disappear?
Yeah, I think keeping an open line of communication, and I mean being very intentional about that. I'm not talking about send an email blast out whenever your film is screening somewhere. I'm talking about send out invites to the people who are featured in the film. I know in this particular film, Nick probably doesn't even know. He has maybe 10 to 15 other community leaders in this film that he doesn't even know are leaders in the community who have huge reach, huge followings. And when they see themselves in a small 10 seconds, 5 seconds, or 2 seconds of the moment of their life where they were participating in whatever event that they were at in this film, they're going to go tell 100 more people that I'm in this documentary, you should go watch it. And then that's going to spread it like wildfire in our community alone. And sometimes just seeing yourself on screen and feeling validated is enough for people, especially in a community that feels underserved and underappreciated. So I think that it's very important to just be intentional about reaching back to as many people as you can identify in a documentary film like this, and letting them know what the progress is, how well it's doing, where it's going, and just keeping that communication going. Because I'm an organizer at heart, I'm always thinking about how can I include other people? How can I keep them engaged? How can I move them forward? And so when Nick lets me know, oh, we're doing this and we're doing that, I would not have been able to send my co-host at that rally the link to IRL if Nick had not been keeping me informed. And by doing so, now she's going to spread it all over Tennessee. And it's just like, it's that thing that validates. And from there, people take interest in the characters or the individuals that they see, and then they reach out to help those people. But again, they can't find them if they don't have a line of communication. So I think that's the greatest way to be impactful.
Thank you.
Thank
Well,
you, Karen. Carol.
Hi, well, I love this film. I have questions, just one. Um, the music, how did that come about? Finding the composer, knowing, how you wanted that scored.
Uh,
I
yeah,
guess
this,
sorry,
the score was composed by Sarah Lynch, who's a brilliant composer. And I was so fortunate to work with her. And the reason I was able to work with her was really a snowball effect of starting with Doug. It was once Doug got more involved, he connected me with Maeve and Jordan, who became the final editors, and he had a past relationship with them. So we worked together, and Sarah was a composer on like Maeve and Jordan's films. And so it was through that personal connection that I was able to work with her, who um, she was so great and so patient with me as a first-time filmmaker. Um, and yeah, I mean, it was perfect. I mean, I wanted an emotional score. And also I think music for a personal doc can really help it feel more cinematic, and yeah, that was one of my favorite creative parts of the whole movie, was working on the score with Sarah. And also as a director, it's one of the nice moments where you can actually kind of like take off some of the burden of responsibility onto someone else and trust them and let them put a little bit of work into it. It was so fun. So I felt so lucky that I had the funds to be able to work with a composer.
Thank you. Mark.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Erica. Nick, Doug, and Leo, it's a great documentary. I was glued all the way through, and I agree with Doug. I think when the first conversation with Dad comes along, and you're having a breakdown of opinions, that really gripped me from that point on. And I found the narrative very clear and multi-layered. I think, as Erica said, there's some masculinity and emotion in there as well, which is beautifully articulated there with the race and the political issues as well. And also, I found the guy that took his own life was a bit of a twist for me, because he was being very constructive in that meeting, and then you find out that he ends up doing what he does because of the situation. So great doc. I want to ask you about your, Doug said you had great editors. What was your working relationship with the editors on a day-to-day or regular basis? What was that like?
Yeah, we had it was a very challenging edit, to be honest with you. And it spanned almost 3 years. And a lot of that was dictated by not having all of the money really upfront, and that's a lesson, and it's something that Doug has also said before, is it can be a real trap if you start editing too early and you don't have all the money to complete the process. I worked with in total like 3 editors on the project, and we just, I think we struggled for the first couple years to weave the two narratives together the way that we wanted to. From a process perspective, I mostly was working with folks 4 days a week, and most editing was done virtually. Worked with editors that were in California, editors that were in Dublin, so there was a time difference. And I was, sometimes I was able to work full time on this. Other times I had to do this while balancing a full-time job, and it was tough. But we managed to get it done, and I give every editor that touched this project gave something to it that helped it, So, but I will say by far it was the hardest part of all of this, but also the most critical, because without the right editing, we wouldn't all be here today. It wouldn't have become the movie that it is.
Simon.
Yeah, hi Nick. I certainly agree with Mark that it was a really excellent documentary. But I'm interested to know, could you possibly give us an idea of what the total budget was to complete it and sort of break down the fundraising? So I get the idea it's probably in stages, but I'd be very interested to know, and I think other people would. Okay.
Yeah. You know, with a personal film, sometimes your personal finances and the film finances get a little bit blurry. Or I guess anyone who's making an independent film, it gets like that. But yeah, I mean, I'll be very candid about the costs. I think our total budget over this whole 10-year period is around $300,000. And I would say we've raised about $150,000, and I've spent about $150,000 of my own money over that stretch of time. So it has been no, yeah, small cost. I mean, to be frank though, that's actually from an overall budget perspective, that's on the low end for most documentaries, but that's what we were able to do it for.
Thanks. Mark.
I'm so happy for you, Nick. I got to see you in
Yeah.
Slam Dance, and I walked out of there and I went, what a great film that was. And my doc that I've been working on is a racial thing too, and I gave up on it because I just didn't think I had the depth. And after seeing your film, I went, God, that's so much better than mine. And then about 3 months later, I asked Doug, I go, Doug, how's the film going? And he was really like, nah, it's not happening. And I got so bummed on the freaking business of this shit, and that someone's going to make this good film, and it's going to sit there because of our industry is just not going. So what was it, Nick, that kept you and Doug? But we know Doug has been around for a long time. So I would imagine Doug had those great words of wisdom to you to keep you going.
Amazing
what,
words of wisdom, just
huh?
incredible words of wisdom. Yeah.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah, right.
But what was it, Nick, that kept you going forward and that emotional thing as a filmmaker, especially all this money coming out of your pocket? What was it?
It was the fallacy of the sunk cost. No, I'm just kidding. But it was um I mean, being so personally invested, on every level, on emotional level, on a um even a spiritual level, financial level. I mean, the funny thing is, like, Omaha's a small enough community where a lot of people knew I was making this thing, right? And for the first couple of years, your friends and your colleagues will be like, "Oh, how's the film going?" And then after 4 years, after 5 years, people stop asking because they're like, he'll tell us when it's ready. So, I just didn't want to let people down also who were counting on me. And a big motivator too was also to honor my dad and my family too. And there was a really challenging part of making this movie when I showed, by mistake, some footage to my family too early that made people concerned. And then that hung over me for many years of like, oh my gosh, am I gonna just like, ruin all these relationships? And, is everyone gonna hate me, because I don't get this right? And so, um, I mean, at the end of the day, it was like also just a battle of like, I must finish this, for myself and know that I'll have a tremendous amount of satisfaction for having completing it, and that alone is enough of a goal for me. Um, that allowed me to not get too stressed about worrying about what other people were going to think. And honestly, how it's been received so far has exceeded my expectations, which I'm so grateful for. There was a point in time where I really was just hoping we could finish and have something to show, but it's been even more than that. So, yeah, I guess just not giving up.
Yeah, I'll just add that, there were several kind of forks in the road where, you can get so wrapped up in when you're making a budget film and saving money, particularly when it's coming out of your pocket, and make decisions based on cost. And for instance, when Nick made the decision to work with Maeve, I mean, Maeve is a really established, incredible editor, and she's, they're not cheap. And it was really a commitment to be working with her for several months, and then Jordan as well. Um, but another example is when it came time to do a trailer recently. We explored, different editors and what they cost. And there was another company whose work we really liked, who kind of stood out head and shoulders, but they were even giving us a break. They were twice as much as the editors. And Nick really didn't hesitate to just go with the one. We knew how important a trailer would be for this kind of film. And he just, made the right call and, just had faith that somehow or other it will work out. He realized the importance of having a great editor, having a great trailer. Um, so it as a producer, it's just so great to work with someone like that. And uh, I'm just really, really happy that it's working out. I give all credit to him.
Thanks, Doug. Christine.
Yeah, thank you both or all three of you for being on this. I'm in post on my first documentary film actually, and this is so helpful because of the sense of, it's like I've got to do this, if only for, it's not even me, but if only for the people that we filmed, and it's hard. Gosh, there's so much I want to ask you about, but I guess two things in particular. One is obviously and I'm watching it tonight, so I haven't watched it. One question I have is about the score, because having heard someone else's comment and how you worked with the composer, what kind of direction you gave them, and how you tweaked it, what that process was like for you, because I'm going to be getting into that soon. And then the other thing is really where mine started, I'm sure you too, was the impact. And I'd love to hear also about your relationship, how you came to Carrot, how you worked with them, and also the costs involved, and what you what really what's really working, and how you might have set it up differently to start with.
Yeah, thanks for your questions and good luck on your post-production. So with the composer, I started out by sending her a Spotify playlist of film music that I really liked, that I was inspired by, and she started by composing a few sample themes that we could listen to, and that was so fun, to see like, oh, this is like the potential. And then she just started working on cues, and would give me her music on top of scenes. One of the hardest parts about of that process is that you can get very committed to the temp music that is in the movie, and it'll feel perfect, right? And then you got to find a way to like forget that ever existed, and then put yourself in this place of feeling this new music. Um, and so yeah, that was the process. And giving notes, I learned that, and I kind of learned this from the editing too, is that you're best served by just being as direct and as honest as possible as soon as possible. Like, you really can't afford to beat around the bush. Like, it doesn't serve anyone, because there's so much pressure, there's so much, time is money when you're working with these people. So I knew that Sarah was enough of a pro that I could just be honest if I didn't like something. And at first that felt a little uncomfortable. I didn't want to like insult her craft, but that's the best way to do it, is you just have to trust people, and if you're working with someone who's a pro, they won't take that stuff personally. The second question about impact. So we interviewed a lot of different people at different impact campaigns, or different impact producers, and a lot of good things stood out with Carrot. I liked that they had a team of people, and it wasn't just one dedicated person that we had. And it was a diverse team too, which was very helpful to have a diversified perspective. They came from Participant, which has a really great track record. And they were just so thoughtful. Like, they watched the film, they gave us a very detailed proposal of what they wanted to do. We threw out some very ambitious goals that they didn't bat an eye at. Like, I told them I would love to have a screening in every state, and they were like, let's aim for that, And so they just brought so much enthusiasm to the whole thing that I felt like, okay, I can trust them. And it's a big commitment, because it is a significant budget. It's We negotiated with them, and I think you can kind of do that with most impact producers, but our impact campaign is costing about $5,000 per month right now, and we have the money until at least the end of October, and then our hope is to raise more to keep them on, because they're doing a great job. So, but there's a lot of great people in the impact space out there. I would just encourage you to interview a lot of them, and feel like who you have good chemistry with. So.
Thank you. And I'll just put in one more pitch for our YouTube channel, that we have done, I think, at least one session that was with impact producers. So if you want to dive deeper into that, we'll probably, I'm sure in the coming year, we might do it again. So stay tuned. But let's bring up Marcia.
Hi. I want to start with a compliment. I was very struck by your filmmaker interview and his discussion of truth. It brought the whole thing together. And then I was even more impressed structurally how Ghost and Leo balanced the story out with who people went to, your father, Ghost, Leo, you, to help find truth and expand your universe. So I loved those moments and didn't expect it because it came so late, but it just really impressed me. So I have a question about your dad. I was very moved by his discussion of you're probing about his employment when you were very young. And it surprised me because everything looked so nice and comfortable in your home. And I was wondering if that struggle led him to the Trump ideas and where he felt comfortable. And before you answer, I just want to ask also, I'll slip this in. I'm the director of news and documentary at NYU. Did your journalism education help you with this documentary?
Thanks, Marcia. That's great questions. Yeah, to answer the second one first, yes, it definitely helped. So in college, I was a newspaper reporter. That's really what I thought I was going to do career-wise. And so, I mean, I had countless interviews, and you get really good at talking to people and improvising questions on the fly, and you just kind of develop instincts for like what's a good question and how to take an interview and how to read a person and all that stuff. That all helped. So yeah, with my dad's politics, yes, I do think economic conditions played a big part. So my dad didn't go to college. He was, he kind of came up through the ranks, and he worked 100% sales commission job. So it's very stressful and very turbulent. And I think that, he had a kind of like libertarian mindset of like I'm, responsible for myself and I don't want the government interfering in my life and in what I want to do. And that kind of dictated his politics. And I think that when things like, I remember when 9/11 happened, it was really tough on his industry and his business, and we suffered financially as a family. Same thing with the '08 crisis. And so I think my dad felt failed in many cases by the systems and just generally, had mistrust for the government. And also the other thing is my dad was a big consumer of conservative news, listened to Rush Limbaugh radio, watched Fox News. During the Obama years, those programs got way more intense and divisive and he was consuming that content. And so one of the things I wanted to it's a bit of a hint, but in the movie I read a Christmas letter from my dad and it like opens up with like a criticism of Obama, and the point was to show how how prevalent politics was in our family, that it was something that could come up in a Christmas letter and that wasn't strange. So, yeah, I hope
Well,
that's helpful.
yes, I won't forget the 3-year-old can of peas. That was very powerful for me. What your dad said, when he had to eat a 3-year-old can of peas, that really.
Yeah.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Just to kind of give us a time check, we have about 15 minutes left, and I think we have at least 7 more questions. So let's go through them, and starting with Paul.
We can probably go a little bit later, Erica, if need be, a little bit.
Okay, well, first, Nick, thank you for offering yourself as a sacrifice. You obviously were pretty uncomfortable, and you were uncomfortable enough that you reached out to Leo for help. And thank you, Leo, for your generosity. You know what I mean? Because maybe you saw in this man, tabla rasa. He's open. It's possible that he will tell this story. But thank you for being his Sherpa, for getting him through this. Because I think, as you said in the movie, it's like, yeah, we already know this. We got to convince a whole other audience here that doesn't understand. It's like, I think, oh yeah, everybody has what I have. It's like, that's not true, but you don't know it until you experience it. So then, Nick, you going to Leo and seeing the situation through his eyes, you go, oh, but how could you have ever known that? You're on the other side of Omaha. But I have one question about your new mayor. Has your new mayor been able to make a difference with this whole situation, and possibly he can attend, the screening or something like that.
Yeah, we're hoping to get the mayor to one of our screenings, and would love to get Leo's answer on this too. But so our new mayor is the first Black mayor in Omaha's history. He was elected earlier this year, and I mean, it's a big celebration in a lot of ways. I mean, I think I know I did, but many others felt that the leadership from the mayor's office had just felt uninspired and flat for many years, and especially when it came to any kind of consideration to North Omaha was totally lacking. So it's a major win. Now at the same time, just because of all of those things, it doesn't lead to immediate change or immediate, I think, like there's a lot of work that's got to be done, but I know for me, it was incredibly inspiring, and I feel very optimistic about Omaha's trajectory. Do you want to add to that, Leo?
Yeah, I think Nick's commentary is very spot on. That's a great way to put it, Nick. I think literally in real time, today is going to be the greatest test of our mayor so far, because he has to deliver a message that appeases very right wing, system believing police officers and folks who have trusted the judicial process and system, while also addressing the historic and chronic injustices that have faced North Omaha's primarily so-called minority community. And he's got to do that this afternoon. I just got a message that that press conference is about to come on. That is going to be probably his greatest test in office. He's only been in office about maybe 6 months now, or not even 6 months. It's been since July, so he's only been in office about 3 or 4 months. And this is going to be one of those turning points for him to where he's going to gain more trust as a whole, as a city, by handling the situation correctly, or is going to create a greater divide. And what's really interesting is the timeliness of this film, because this is an opportunity for us to not only spark dialogue, but show that it's possible to have some really hard conversations and still keep our sanity.
I feel like that is the sentence for the year on so many levels. So let's bring up Sally.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thanks, Nick, Leo, Doug. It's such a beautiful film. I'll try and keep this brief. I do have a lot to say. I do want to call out the filmmaking craft. It's obviously your first film, but you really did sort of craft a beautiful film within the limitations. I have two quick questions. I was watching the film with some distractions, but I'm really curious about your mum, Nick. Where is she?
Yeah. So my mom was not as interested in participating. We were thankfully able to sneak her in at the beginning so people knew that she existed. But I'm very proud to say that she's very much come around to appreciating the film. There's a lot of reasons that she didn't want to participate, and some of it have to do with the fact that, like, my mom and dad had their own unique relationship that had challenges, and there was things that, like, they didn't want to talk about or get into. What's really meant a lot to me is that my family, since the film has come out, have just appreciated it, and they see the value in it. And for anyone on the film who's making a personal doc, that's one of the hardest parts is knowing that this is going to affect your family in some ways. So, I made every mistake in the book when it came to that, but I'm feeling very grateful now about the reception. So
Thanks. Next up is Claire.
Hi, everybody. I was so blown away by this film. I cannot even say. I started watching it and I thought, oh, I'm going to watch this. and I was immediately captivated by the narrator voice that you had throughout the film. It was so measured and so calm and yet even-handed. And I wondered how, I mean, I have a million questions, but but my main one is, how hard did you work on the narration and how did that evolve over the making of the film?
Yeah, thanks for asking about that, because I think that that is it's an unsung aspect of why the movie works. Is we put a ton of thought into the narration, and I gotta give Doug a lot of credit for that. Was one of the first areas he came in and immediately started consulting, was giving notes. One of his big ones was actually to change the tense of going from past tense to present tense with the narration. It makes the movie feel way more present that way. That was an amazing insight, and Doug has done brilliant narration on all of his films, so I learned a lot from him. It was a really long process. I mean, the 3 hour rough cut that we had, I did narration wall to wall on that thing, and not a single line made it into the final cut. I mean, that was so much work. I mean, I would sometimes and I was like recording narration in a closet sometimes to get sound perfect. So I can't tell you the amount of hours spent practicing that voice. So yeah, there was the narration was a process, but I'm a writer. That's what I did before filmmaking. It was very natural for me to do that, and I liked the challenge of it. I mean, I liked how every word really mattered. And then once you even have all the words out, you have to practice saying it. And sometimes it doesn't sound as good as it feels to write it. So then you got to change that. And then you have to not only read the lines, but you kind of have to perform the lines, and you have to emphasize certain ones. So I loved that part of it. But it took a ton of work. And we were crafting it till the last minute. I did a voiceover reread during the sound mix, so it was till the buzzer.
Yeah, two other things we talked about besides tense. And Nick was always slipping back into past tense. I don't know. I always had to be on guard about that. But my feeling is the most minimal narration you can possibly do, the better. Just keep it really spare. And I'm a big believer in like keeping your feelings out of narration. Don't explain your feelings, let it emerge, organically and cinematically, show us the feelings. Don't talk about, oh, I was so upset by my father doing, I just can't talk to my father, but trust that it will come out through the footage.
And one piece of advice from a practical perspective that Maeve taught me was to go fast and loose at the beginning, and then when you know what it is, then refine it. Because I was doing all these temp tracks on the mic and trying to get it to sound perfect, but like she was like, just record it on your phone and text it to me and I'll put it in. And I was like, what? That seems so informal, but it helped us move so much quicker, and we could judge if it was working or not so much faster. So that was a great lesson I learned too.
Yeah, I mean, you can also put it up just as a graphic, even if you don't have it said. Editors are so helpful doing narration. I mean, I give the editors I work with co-writer credit just because they're helping me not write it per se, but like know where it goes. And like, the editor for me on 51 Birch Street would just say, this is where it's coming from. Like maybe the first line goes something like this, and it gets to this point, and so it's a back and forth thing with the editor, but they're just so helpful.
Yay, editors. Awesome. Connie.
Based on editors, what a great segue. Thank you. First of all, congratulations and thank you, Nick, Leo, and Doug, for this really incredibly vulnerable portrait of the lives of the people you showed. It was palpable. I'm watching it again tonight. I'm so glad the link is back up again. So here's my question. It's about the tech process, the editing process. Not everybody gets the fun of starting with the editor from the very beginning with the rough cut. So I want to ask you, Nick, about that process. You mentioned a lot of hands-on in the editing process, and you played a role in that in the beginning, I think you said. For what stages were you, and when did Maeve and Jordan come into the process, and were there other editors involved between you and Maeve and Jordan?
Yeah, so I edited my very first sample to raise money, and I just taught myself how to use the software. It was really long though. I mean, I think I got it to like 30 minutes. But to be honest, we used that to raise probably half of the money we fundraised, because it was right around the time that all the protests during the George Floyd protests were happening in 2020. So everyone in Omaha was like, you know, they saw the resonance, right? Then after that, I worked with editors at every stage. I worked with an editor who I met through the D Word to cut a sample. I worked with another editor through the D Word to start editing the movie for years. I will say, like, it's hard to say a very succinct lesson about the editing, because there's so many things that happen. But one big lesson I always think about is a big mistake I made in the early editing of the feature was that I was getting very hung up on editing perfect standalone scenes. And we would like edit these perfect scenes, and then we would move on and cut the next perfect scene. And then you would line them up, and it was like, what? Like, this doesn't work at all as a movie. Like, like, I was totally lost sense of like the connectivity and the flow and the pace and everything from a film like grammar perspective that matters with editing. And I was just so hung up on getting like the story and the emotions right. So that, I think, is really where Maeve and Jordan helped elevate it, was like their amount of experience of understanding like the almost like unconscious way that someone watches a movie, and like when a scene is starting to drag versus when you can go a little bit longer. Like, they brought that into it, where the movie all of a sudden felt elevated from a, assembly of scenes to a movie. So that would be my lesson, is if you're editing it yourself, like, don't ever, don't judge a standalone scene to see how successful your editing is. Like, judge like 15 minutes of your cut to know how it's working.
Great advice. Joanne's back. Come on up.
I have a question for Leo. Leo, what did you learn from being in this documentary film? And might you be inspired to make your own film moving forward with what's happening in Omaha now?
I think what I learned so far, I'm still learning. This is still a process. But what I've learned so far is that once I realized that it's okay for Nick to film some stuff, that I can be more available. I know I was hard to reach. There was many times he tried to catch me, and just like right now, I'm always on the go. And so I didn't make time to go, hey, Nick, this thing is about to happen. You should probably be here. Instead, I was like, this thing is happening and I got to do it. And so it wasn't a consideration for me to make it a priority, to know how important it was to capture those moments. And now when I look back at a lot of the moments that took place, there is so much that wasn't captured on film. There's so much that should have been captured on film. Like, even the conversation with my lady and telling her that Nick wants to come to our apartment was something he probably should have captured on film. Just the conversation alone. She's like, you trust him enough to bring him into the house? I'm like, yeah, we're going to see. and so just that alone was a big lesson for me, is that once I've said I'm committed, to continue to just stick to that commitment and make as much opportunity as possible to make sure that he has what he needs. And will I make my own documentary film? No. I will probably commission somebody, might commission Nick to come do some stuff, but I myself don't see that I'll be, grabbing a camera and trying to chase myself around.
Right. AK, are you there?
Hey, good to see you, Nick. Congrats.
Hey, good to see
I was
you.
curious if you guys could talk about the Cartemquin Association on the business side. Like for that association, do they give a grant or do they try to get equity or how does that sort of all work?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Cartemquin, actually, that partnership that we got is fee-based, so we actually pay, but it is pretty modest. Um, our film was like a unique fit for them in the sense that it was both a Midwestern story and a social issue film. So what we got out of their partnership is basically like their association, but also their consulting on everything from distribution strategy to impact strategy, um, and really just like the honor of being within the Cartemquin family of films and like the connectivity we've had with other people that have made Cartemquin films. Like I'm sure a lot of you know who they are, but they made Hoop Dreams, Minding the Gap. Steve James, rolls up a lot of his films under Cartemquin's umbrella. So, that to me was a real accomplishment on the producing side of this movie because I wanted, as an independent film kind of coming out of the blue, I wanted people to know that like our process was done thoughtfully and respectfully. And I think them coming on board helped give us that. And I'm very proud of that and very grateful to them and everything we've learned from that partnership.
Thanks. Gabe.
Yeah, hey everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Mhm.
Okay, good. Yeah, great, amazing film. Really resonated with me personally because I've been working for years on a film about my dad and my relationship, and he also took a hard turn for the right, especially during the pandemic. I had to shelve it for a while because things went really south with our relationship, and I didn't feel like I could make a film where I was just airing our dirty laundry, but that started to turn again, and so I'm starting to feel some hope that I might be able to pick it back up at some point and actually finish something. Um, anyway, I don't know if I have a question on that side of things. I'm right now in early like pre-distribution impact stage with a different project that is more of a verite thing on homelessness, and I'm curious. Um, like I heard you guys talk about doing community screenings with My Omaha, but I don't see a page on the website. Is that something that's coming soon, or just more around that aspect of your outreach campaign? Because I think that's going to be probably the avenue that's I think will likely prove the most successful for my film. Um, also just got into a couple film festivals, been rejected by a lot. So I appreciate hearing your guys' story on that front.
Yeah.
We hope we'll get a lot of community screenings. I mean, that's what Carrot is helping us with. But, from the beginning, Nick and I talked about this film being an opportunity to get it out to audiences that normally don't go to documentaries, and that's like conservatives. Um, they, we tend to preach to the choir with our documentaries, and so even the trailer is edited to almost make it seem like Nick's dad is the protagonist of the film, but we certainly want him to come off sympathetically, and almost feel like, oh, we're going to see this character we can relate to, and by the end of the film, they may be even open to Nick, like this progressive guy, being like a human being. So it's exciting to think that we can get it to those audiences, and we thought churches and, you know, like I said, faith-based institutions of every kind would be a really good way to go to reach out to them.
To answer like also the practical part of that question is that we're working to integrate with Gather right now. If you haven't heard of Gather, it's a platform where people can actually formally request a screening, and then there's a bunch of tools for them to fill that out and facilitate that. At the moment, we have a contact page on our website where people can get in touch and request a screening, but we're working on elevating that to the Gather platform. So.
All right, so we are over time. We have time for 2 more questions. I'm so sorry, Dan. I know you raised your hand quite late, but why don't we go first with Cheng and then Zhu?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm on my phone today. Yeah, congratulations. This is very personal, and I am stunned by mostly your shot is by one person, right? And uh, do do you have experience of being a photographer or videographer?
Not before this movie. It was all very self-taught. And I got to give credit to a camera person I worked a lot with, James Zanders, who Leo got to know while making this. James is a friend from college who basically taught me the fundamentals of how to use a camera. Um, but I think what helped is like I just learned how to shoot by shooting things. Like I went to lots of, you know, community events, lots of town halls, lots of parades, and like over time just got better at filming them. Um, and in the process made so many mistakes that I beat myself up about. I mean, I went out to shoots and filmed the whole thing and forgot to have the microphone on and lost all the sound. And I even did a shoot one time where I was borrowing a camera and I actually mixed up when I was recording versus when I was not recording. So everything I thought I was recording, I wasn't, and vice versa. So like it was very amateurish at the beginning. Um, so the way that that translated into being able to do some of the self-shooting stuff was that I got to know the technicalities of my camera like the back of my hand because I'd filmed so many hours of stuff that I was doing a lot of filming outdoors. The way that I made my film was, um, you know, I never tried to like get too hung up about like the right lighting or the right this or that. It was more like it was practicalities drove everything. It was like, where do we have space and where is it quiet and where can we be comfortable? And then work everything else around that. And yeah, but I think it was, if I could go back, I would give myself a little more grace about some of the mistakes technically I made because some of them haunted me. I mean, we did an interview with Leo actually at the very beginning that we lost sound on, and I was, you know, heartbroken about. But then to his credit, he was willing to do more interviews, and we were able to piece together what we missed. So, yeah, it's part of the process.
Okay, and we're gonna finish with Zhu.
Hi, thank you, Erica, and great to see you all. And it's great to see you, Nick, and also Doug in LA a few months ago. I think it was February. I think you guys just had the slam dance right there. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was wonderful to meet you in person. And
you too.
as you know, I'm also a fellow personal dog filmmaker. In fact, Doug consulted already a bit on our film, which is really wonderful, much appreciated. Um, I'll say, you know, to you, Nick, that what are some of my favorite scenes were like you and your dad talking about Trump, just like how Doug's wife reacted. I just thought that was just golden. It was just so authentic and so natural, captured the essence of the people in there and the relationship. I also was very touched by the scene of you and your dad near the end before he passed. Like you're sitting in a, was it a church? Like you're face to face. A question I have is about your editorial choices about showing like really vulnerable and very, very intimate scenes. And, you know, because I face similar challenges in our film because my husband died and there are certain scenes that we may or may not show. So I want to hear your thoughts about how you make those choices. To drive the narrative and also both get the emotional turmoil and vulnerability, but also be protective of, you know, the loved ones, like certain scenes you may never want to show. So how do you make those choices? And the last question I have is about narration, which another person asked already, but I want to focus on in your narrative choices, you know, we always hear about try to do show more rather than tell because it's a visual, you know, medium. So how do you, in the end, hone in on the necessary narrative part that you have to do, but without like being too wordy or not too visually interesting. So these are my questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. It was great to meet you in LA, like you said too. So let me try to tackle as much as I can. The narration side, we started to cut lines. Once we had a rough cut, I think that was the biggest changes that went from the rough cut to the final cut was let's cut this line of voiceover, let's cut this line of voiceover, just like let the film breathe more. Sometimes you have to have more than you think at the beginning to just get you where you need to go. And then once you realize that maybe you can trust the audience a little bit more for things to stand on their own, you can start to cut those things. So that was the narration process. For the editing that you were talking about. So one of the things that's interesting about My Omaha, I think, is that the interviews that we do with both me and my dad and me and Leo have very poignant, and with Bill Jersey, actually, all have very in the moment standalone poignancy, which is not always the case in docs. I think sometimes interviews and docs are more exposition driven and they're more background driven, and like you can't just like you need music, you gotta like you like those are the interviews that kind of help like propel the story. Our conversations were like they were the film, and so we didn't want to get in the way of them. Like we didn't want to put music in there, we didn't want to do anything to kind of diminish feeling like you were just in the room and have being a part of that conversation. So um I think it was everything around that we did to help the movie flow, which is like, there's really no music on top of any dialogue or conversation in the movie. And that was a choice to make it feel super present. So um I hope that answers the basis of your question, but yeah, I think that's what made ours unique.
Now, are there segments where you really loved as you were editing, like you just thought they were just so good, but then because of time limitation or, you know, maybe it doesn't quite fit that you have to let go?
In the moment there is, but I will say one of the things that has surprised me is that now I don't think about anything we've cut like ever. Like to me the movie is the movie and that's what stands. And I think that maybe in the future, because I have so much unused footage, there'll be a time and place to go through some of that and see if there's like any other stories to use. But like I think most times when you're cutting scenes, it's making the film better. And then I just got so happy that the film was getting better that outweighed any kind of nostalgia I had for the stuff we had to cut. So like it's very much like the sum is greater than the parts kind of a thing where like by cutting and you make the whole movie better, you know, it's a small price to pay for like a little moment here or there that you fall in love with. So.
And I think that's a wonderful note to close on. I just want to thank, everybody for great questions, but most of all, I just want to thank Nick and Doug and especially Leo. You didn't need to spend this much time with us asking a bunch of questions about the process of making a film, but we really appreciate you being here, being a part of this film, and we can't wait to hear how things go with the Omaha screening and with the IRL and beyond. So thank you all, or if you have any final things you want to say,
Yeah, I
go
want
right
to.
ahead.
I want to say something. I wanted to give you a good out for the recording, Erica, before I broke in. Yeah, a couple of things come to mind. You know, we do these case studies from time to time. And it's great to talk about the process to a bunch of filmmakers. The filmmakers always appreciate the opportunity to speak to their colleagues, because oftentimes at Q&As, most of the time at Q&As, the audience wants to talk about the subject matter of the film, and they're often talking to the participants. So be prepared, Leo, when we do our Q&As in a week or two. It's mostly going to be coming at you. But, you know, the reason why, when we make sure that the filmmakers agree to give us a 2-week window at least for you to see the film before we do these. It's obviously critical that you guys got the chance to see it, and most of you did. And that's hard to do. I mean, we're sometimes having to go back and forth with distributors, or, get the opportunity. Filmmakers are very reluctant to show it in advance of their premieres and things like that. But we make the case that very few people are going to pay money to see it in the theater, and it's worth it to get the word out about the film. So if you saw the film and liked it, it would really help us if you talked it up when you can, or let other people know, about the IRL Movie Club. And, we will promote as best we can when it's going to be playing on outside of Omaha, and where it goes from there. So, but, word of mouth is so important. Also, let me see, another point is
Can I interject for 1 second and ask, in terms of your plans for distribution of the film, have you contemplated and have any plans to move beyond the continental United States in terms of distribution?
Absolutely, Art. We just were in the process of talking to sales agents, and seeing if we can get one who does it on an international scale. It's interesting because Annie Roney, who's heading up IRL Movie Club, has been an international sales agent for many years, but she's so focused on IRL that, I think if an opportunity came up, she would do it. But, she doesn't want to go in that direction, at least yet, for this film. But I did want to say, it's just such it's really great to work with people who you appreciate working with, and I want to give all credit to Nick. He's been like an amazing partner on this, and it's such a gift to work with people who are in it for the right reasons, make decisions based on what's best for the film. And my big hope for this is, yes, it's an outreach film, but I'm trying to be really cognizant of the fact that he's young and he has a whole career ahead of him that he's trying to establish. And I really want the people in the film industry to recognize the film. So when we think of getting it out in the world, I personally don't want to just think of it as an outreach film. I want to be able to get reviews for it and get it on the industry radar, and get it recognized as, you know, the great film that I think it is, just as a piece of filmmaking. So anyway, all that's to say, you know, my thanks to Nick for, you know, being the collaborator that he is. And finally, thanks to Leo. You know, you're just such an essential part of the film. You make the film, really, and you make it a bigger story. You know, one of the things that we worked on in the editing was, you know, it was initially really focused on Nick and his father. And you know, we felt like your presence in there made it a much bigger story, and much more important story. You know, there's a lot of films about fathers and sons, but to do it in the context of, you know, a bigger story and taking place in Omaha, that is literally the center of the country, you know, and we're premiering and then moving out from there is also really important. So thank you too. I look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Just to
And
say something to, I mean, I think everyone here in the D-word community knows like how amazing Doug is, but like truly, we would not have been able to make this film the way we did without Doug. I mean, not only from the community that he built with the D-word and all the people I met who helped contribute to the movie, but then, you know, just the selflessness to come on board the way that he did, as for me as a first-time filmmaker and not really having all of the knowledge and resources and all this stuff. I mean, it's really changed my life. So thank you, Doug, you know, for everything that you've done. And I mean, it's been such an honor to have you on board and for you to champion the film like you have. I mean, it's you know, I feel so lucky and fortunate for that. And yeah, Leo, thank you for being on here with us. And it's always a joy just to talk about the partnership that we had and how it can be an example for other people that want to make a film, and to do it the right way. I'll let you have the last word, but before I do that, like Doug said, it really helps to when other filmmakers can support these films. So like if you liked it, if you could leave like a letterbox review, if you're on Letterbox, that would be really helpful. Just tell your friends about the IRL Film Club. Anything like that really helps us out. So it means a lot to come back on these calls. I mean, I remember in 2020, I would join these, and you know, it was like coming home, you know, like finding other people struggling in the thick of things like I was. And so I hope that everything we shared today was helpful, and I hope that can continue to be helpful in the future for anyone who needs some support. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, just briefly, really quick. Thank you all. I appreciate the opportunity to just have a discussion and always to just talk about the work. One thing I do want to say to you, Nick, is two things. Number one, thank you for keeping your word and making sure that you did your best to reflect our community in a positive light and in a righteous light, because you did keep your word. That's 10 years ago that you said you were going to do that, and you did. So I appreciate that. And I want to acknowledge you in front of your peers that was the most valuable part of me staying involved in the project, is watching your integrity continue to grow and stay throughout this process. Also, your reflection, I believe, is your greatest asset, because that's what showed up on film, is your ability to take some time, sit back, think, and then come back and put that on camera. And when individuals lose that and they start to get in their ego and think that everybody else is a subject and they're not a part of it, I think that's when you lose the essence of it being a truly vulnerable piece. So I just wanted to say I appreciate that, and I look forward to, at some level in life, working with everybody on the screen, even if that's just through the film itself. So appreciate you all, and thanks, Doug, for your mentorship, and appreciate you all for having me.
Okay, thanks, Leo.
Thanks, Leo.
thank you, everybody.